Welcome to Where Parents Talk. My name is Lianne Castelino. Our guest today is a teacher, a coach, and a referee. Roger Nurse was a high-level athlete in his own right, competing for Canada in lacrosse. He's also a hockey dad. All three of his children play hockey at a high level. His daughter, Sarah Nurse, is a member of Canada's national women's team. Roger Nurse joins us today from Hamilton, Ontario. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lianne.
What led to sport being such a cornerstone of yours and your family's life?
It's really interesting because my parents weren't the most athletic people. Um, and you kind of, funny story, I tend to find this out a little bit later because I came to Canada, I was 2 years old. So my parents came with some of my brothers and sisters, some were born here. And, my dad, my mom said he played a little bit of soccer. We never saw him play soccer. We see my dad fumble the ball a few other times. Like, dad doesn't look he's that good. So we're not sure how athletic my parents were, but I know my mom was not. But one of my dad's friends said to him, because we were energetic kids, and my brother who's a year and a half older than me, he was a fireball. And one of his friends at work said, hey, here in Canada, Canadian kids play hockey in the winter and they play lacrosse in the summer. So that kind of became the thing. So my brother played hockey, then he played lacrosse, and I'm a year and a half younger. So of course I'm just following along. I'm going to the rink and going to the park. I'm going to the field, the floor, wherever. And it just started that way. We started playing, he played hockey. I didn't play hockey formally, played a lot of shinny and all that stuff. I played lacrosse, and then we got into school sports, and it was just what we did. We just kind of played sports. As we got into high school, I played football, played basketball, school sports like elementary school, volleyball, soccer. So we did a little of everything, and it's just a passion. It's just a passion. Like we just love it. I still remember watching TV, and my dad, he put on the Leafs, back in the Ron Ellis, Dave Keon days, and I'm just a little wide-eyed 5-year-old watching the Leafs, and this hockey thing is great. And just Daryl Sittler was my favorite all-time player. I missed meeting him by about a minute and a half a few months ago, which is kind of devastating. But, that was my guy. I remember watching, like, my first memories of the NBA was the Buffalo Braves. I think they went, I'm not sure where they went, maybe to Sacramento, but they were in Buffalo for like a year or two. And Bob McAdoo was their star. And, and then when I started really following the NBA, the Showtime Lakers, and Bob McAdoo went there. So it was like, hey, here's like that. This is my first like basketball idol was Bob McAdoo. Here he's with my guy, Magic Johnson. So it was just a lot of that. Reggie Jackson in the 70s, in the 75, 76 World Series, watching his 3 home. Those are my earliest memories of sports. And I was hooked. So when I had kids, it just kind of was natural. It was like, my kids are going to get into sports. I need to give them every opportunity to play sports, to learn sports. And, they just took to it. We had baseball gloves, baseball bats all over the house. There's soccer balls. Like right now we're going through a lot of purging. And I'm just finding a lot of the stuff when they were little kids, like a little baseball bat that's about 2.5 feet long that they were swinging when they were 3 years old. And, it's like, do we keep these as a souvenir? It's like, no, let's get rid of it. And I saw one of their little baseball gloves, and we just gave them the opportunities, all the exposure, try everything, see what you like, and away you go.
It's so interesting to hear you describe that, coming from parents that weren't athletes themselves, being one of 8 children and following probably each other around. You describe your older brother and all of that, and then being able to share that passion with your kids. It doesn't always happen, right? And your kids have played or are playing at a pretty high level. In what ways would you say that sport has then influenced the way that you parent?
Well, you learn a lot of things out of sports. Like I always say that, you learn about, responsibility, trust. I mean, you have to be around people who have to help you, accountability, conflict resolution, facing adversity. Like right now, we're in a week of having to kind of help Sarah settle down from a very tough loss. And a lot of people just really don't appreciate just how difficult that is. I remember being with my brother, his last game in the CFL. They thought they had a team that had an opportunity to possibly go to the Grey Cup, and he knew it was going to be his last season. Just to go through a lot of these things, that adversity, it's a difficult thing. So you learn these things. You learn how to work with people, collaboration. So when you have all these things that are part of your life and then you have kids, now you sit there and say with your kids, like, okay, well, a lot of things you do matter. You have to face every day. Some of these things have to be responsible. You have to be responsible for what you do. You have to, learn not to make excuses. So accountability for me is always really big. And, there's no excuses. Why didn't you get this done? Well, so no, 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 it wasn't so-and-so. This is you. That's you. People can get in your way and slow things down, make things difficult, but ultimately it's still on you. And they have to understand the responsibility for their own successes, their own failures. Whether you're going to be an elite athlete or not, these are just things you have to learn as a parent. And if your kids grow up to be journalists, to be teachers, you have to have these skills instilled in your children. And I've always thought that's very important to know, to take the things I took from sport, instill those in my children, because I don't know, hey, when they were little kids, I didn't even know if they're going to like sports. You don't know if they're going to follow through, if they're going to play house league hockey and lacrosse until they're 10 and then figure something else, ride skateboards in the park all summer. Like, you just don't know. But those other skills, they're lifelong. And if you have those lifelong skills, your kids will be fine.
So, along those lines, then, how did you and your wife go about trying to strike a balance between, gently encouraging your children, helping them achieve their potential in sport, as an example, while still retaining the fun element of it? Because that is a big pain point for a lot of families.
I always say that one of the best moments is I call it my hockey humbling moment. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And I think a lot of parents see it and don't appreciate it. I really appreciate it. At every hockey association in the world, there's a 6-year-old who scores 100 goals and who's just fantastic. And everyone's touting him as the next great kid. My son Elijah was that kid. He went in and he picked up the puck, skated around everyone and scored. So everyone thought, hey, next big, he's going to be a junior star. He's going to do this, 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 and this. Well, so we went out to this spring elite hockey program and he went to tryouts. He did well, but he made the team as probably the 12th or 13th kid. So he's close to the bottom of the roster. Then we went out to some of these tournaments and we saw some of the players in these tournaments. And it was like, wow. Like there were 4 teams that our best player wasn't going to make. And so I got to see a lot of really, really great hockey players. And then you start doing math. I like math. You start doing math and go, okay, every draft year, there are about 240 kids drafted. And in this tournament, I see at the gentle age of the 98 birth year, about 300 kids. And a lot of them are better than my guy. And we haven't even included the Europeans. So I'm like, okay, there's a lot of good hockey players out here. Your 100 goals are great, but you may never play a game in the NHL. And I have to be prepared for life. And it's funny when you sit there and talk about something happened to a kid at 7 years old, that kind of was humbling. But then as I looked and saw, Sarah was already establishing herself as a talented kid. Isaac was a year younger than EJ, and he was establishing himself as very talented as well. It was like, okay, you guys are very talented, but I have to be prepared for if this dream doesn't happen. Where are we going from there? So now you start focusing on all the skills you just talked about. We have to establish those skills because now you may have to live life like the rest of us, like us normal people. Go to school, go to college, university, get a job, raise a family, be good parents, be good people. And you have to be able to balance all that. And I think that was a very good thing to see early on, so I could reconcile the fact of you don't get caught up in my kids going to the NHL and I'm going to be living great because my kids can be making millions of dollars and da 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 da. So I guess when they're growing up is kind of always remembering, like, chase your dream. We're right here for your dream. We'll give you everything you need for your dream, but you have to remember that you have to do what you have to do because there's a better possibility. And even if you're great, and I've always emphasized to my kid, no matter how great you are, whether you're Connor McDavid, whether you're Marie-Philippe Poulin, you're one injury away from having to get on with a normal life. So that was those are things we really did to kind of keep everyone humble and balanced.
Along those lines, could you take us through some of the sacrifices that you and your wife had to make in order for your three children to enjoy the experiences in hockey that they've had?
I try to avoid using the word sacrifice per se because hockey was just what we did. It was life. So when I look at sacrifices, could I have gone on a couple of lavish vacations? Like, yeah, I'll say to people, my kids didn't play hockey. I could have gone to Hawaii and gone to some, all-inclusive resorts. We could have done all these great things. But then if they didn't play hockey, chance that they would have done something else, which would have taken money out of the pocket. So I don't view so much as sacrifice. I view it so much as we did what we did. We still were able to do things. We did have some times we did get to go on some vacations. But when it got to the point as like there was a point where each of them one it was actually 1 year that happened for all three of them that they all started doing additional on ice stuff during the season, and they were doing off ice stuff in the off season. Sarah had gone up from midget to junior. All of their hockey expenses went up by about $1,200 to $1,500 each, and suddenly there's your vacation fund is gone. Well, we found other things to do. We went to Canada's Wonderland, went on our day trips. We did a bunch of other things like that, and you found a way. I view the sacrifices more as my kids. They miss the school dances. They miss the family events. They miss the time hanging out with their friends. And those are the things that they had to do to chase a dream. We just lived a life. I always say, I just cut checks, stood in the stands and smiled. They're the ones who, hey, there's a school dance. Well, you got a tournament this weekend. They're the ones who missed all that stuff. They're the ones who had to, miss out going and seeing their cousins. Like, we have a set of cousins they're very, very close with. Making those arrangements to all get together at the same time had gotten very difficult because all the kids were involved in stuff. My kids in particular, because they were in rep hockey. So sacrifice is a tough word for parents because it's a choice we make. I think the sacrifice is bigger for the kids because they're taking time out of their childhood.
Roger, how would you go about describing your parenting style?
I guess for me, it was very much, I'd say one of the biggest challenges I had was you want to maintain a good, positive relationship with your kids and also have the authoritarian thing, like who's the boss. And again, I see as a teacher, I see as a parent, it's finding the balance. And I always believe that, displaying a good relationship, me and my wife having a good relationship, showing our kids a good relationship helps breed good people. And I looked at it that, again, so much of things, accountability, responsibility, you have all those things you have to be a good person. I made a big effort to be a good dad, a fun dad, enjoyable dad, but the kids still knew who the boss was. If the kids were acting up, I remember one time I was in a lacrosse tournament and my wife texted me, said they're acting up. And I sent all the kids a text. I said, you realize tomorrow the sheriff's going to be back in town. And they were kind of like, oh, okay. So that was there. Like my kids today, there are rules they still follow, but they had rules when they were little kids because I'm still your dad. And it's important. There has to be structure. There has to be structure, has to be rules. They have to understand the word no. But they have to understand that anything they need to get them ahead, to help them succeed, is there for them. So those are easy asks. If there's things you want, how could we make the want work? If we can make it work, we will. If we can't. But the one thing I'll say, I want my kids to be in need of nothing. If there's anything that they have to have, we find the way. But they have to know the lines between mom, dad, and hey, the guy who puts you on your knee and rocks a horse and be that dad.
It's so interesting. It's such an important point because the perspective that you bring to the question of parenting is really quite multi-layered, right? So you're in the classroom with grade 7s and 8s. You've got 3 kids of your own. You're out there coaching and refereeing and doing all these things, and you see people in all these different backgrounds and backdrops. And for many parents, what we're talking about is a real struggle point in today's day and age with social media and all these other influencing factors. When I say, when you talk about accountability as an example, that is a pain point for many families. So, what would be some of the tips that you can potentially share with parents watching or listening to this interview about how to rein it in and sort of have that balance that you describe where it may not exist in some families?
I think really it's understand the realities and be prepared for everything and anything. Um, I like to look at things is what's the worst thing that can possibly happen? And when you look at what's the worst thing that possibly can happen, I view everything else is kind of a bonus. And it's that most important things in our life, you got to go to school. I mean, number one, take care of your family. Your family is number one, your brothers and sisters, because in most families, I have 3 kids. Two of them are still playing hockey at a high level. My third son loves the game. He still plays recreationally, and he's getting into refereeing now, and he's slowly climbing the refereeing ladder. So his life in hockey at a high level is to get there as a referee now or as a coach, because he coaches as well. So recognizing that the child wants to chase a dream, providing that to chase the dream. But to chase the dream, there's still rules, regulations, there's still expectations. You have to make sure you keep that school balance. Number one, no ifs, ands, or buts. The school balance. Biggest thing with school with my kids is everyone is to graduate on time. Isaac got to the OHL at the beginning of his grade 12 year. And I said, you are going to graduate at the end of this year. There's no taking less courses to focus on hockey. You're going to graduate. That expectation is number one. But the parents have to know that hockey is not central. Hockey is not everything. We don't sacrifice things. When I use the word sacrifice, we don't make determinations because hockey's got to be number one. Like there's other things in life. There are family functions that we had to say no to hockey to go to that are more important. There is also the most important thing is be the parent, make the decisions. When you're deciding, again, I'm not a big proponent of off-season hockey. I learned that halfway through my kid's career of off-season hockey wasn't necessary. But when I talk to teammates and they're big, oh, they're going to play this and they're going to do this. It's like, really? Why? Oh, they want to, and they really want to. It's like, no, when I decided we weren't going to play hockey in the summer, it was my decision as a parent. I felt that what was better for my kids is to not play hockey in the summer. The first summer, they kind of, Dad, please. No, you're not. And then they understood. So dad has to be dad, mom has to be mom. They have to set the guidelines. They can't say we're doing this because they want to. Because if we did everything our kids wanted to, who's ruling the roost? And that's the balance you have to find is we are still in charge. As long as we pay the bills, we buy the clothes, we are still in charge. And our children can't dictate.
How do you go about reconciling the fact that you have all this expertise as a teacher, a coach, all these different things that you do with being a father and watching your kids play sport? Because it's very hard for many people to keep their emotion out of it when they see their own children performing. How did you go about that?
Well, fortunately for me, and how I've always kind of kept myself, I use the word sane. I've always kept my sanity is fortunately being a referee. So no matter how angry I get at a referee, I've been there. I've had 18,000 people pelt things at me. I've been there. I've been spat at. I've been booed. I've had it all. So as a referee, I understand the referee's going through. I understand decision making in milliseconds. So no matter how frustrated I get with how bad a referee is doing out there, I know the job. And so I may want to go storm down the referee's door and scream at him. I find myself taking 2 steps, sitting down and going, you need to stop. I've been there as a coach. So every time I want to have a conversation with the coach, or every time something makes me angry with the coach, my line is to myself is, how would I like parents to deal with me? A lot of times that is my point to say, we're just going to let this roll. I think it's really important parents let coaches coach, do their jobs. That's why we got them here. There's not a lot of parents in the stands who could do better, because if they could, they probably would be coaching. So let the coaches coach. Their job is to develop their child. Let them do that. If they're not developing your child in the way you want them to develop, the unfortunate thing is you're kind of stuck with them for the year. If they're not doing anything wrong, they're not hurting your child physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. As long as that's not happening, they have to be removed from the job. You're stuck with them for the year. So you're going to want to hope that they do their job, and you're going to want to hope that at the end of the season your child is better. One of the things I've always said is, as a coach, I've always said to parents, you may not like a thing I do, but at the end of the season, I promise you, your child will be a better player at the end of the season than you gave him to me at the beginning. And that's all I expect from the coach. I have conversations with the coaches at the end of the season, but a week after the season's over, or between that and tryouts, I'll sit down. Where are we at? Where are we going forward? Is he still part of your plans? What's your plan moving forward for him or her? I just want to keep in the loop of what's going on. If there's something that bothered me during the season, if it bothered me in October, a lot of times I stewed on it all season. I have this meeting at the end of the season with the coach. This bothered me in the fall. Why? Just explain it to me so I could just have peace for the summer. A lot of times, coach got to be treated like teachers. You trust us. You give us that responsibility. You send us your kids to develop them, to learn, to nurture them. That's our job. And I've got to give the coaches that. No amount of yelling or screaming I'm going to do is going to change a thing. So in the best interest of let the coach do their job, hope you have happy kids at the end. And also, I don't believe that even the worst coaches are going to impact on your child's future in sport. Even if you think that this coach is horrible and doesn't know a thing he's doing, if your kid's going to make it somewhere in sport, they're going to make it somewhere in sport. Except the only thing don't want that coach to do is take your kid's love away from the game. And if your coach doesn't do that, if your kid's good enough, they'll be fine.
Sports has been under fire at every level. Headlines in recent months, certainly, whether you're talking about Hockey Canada and some of sort of the hazing scandals and other things that we've seen. What do you see when you look at the sports landscape right now in terms of the participation interest among young athletes who are just in minor amateur sports, just trying to have fun, stay fit, all the way up to the parents' behavior while they're having these athletes participate?
I think the most distressing thing for me is I see sports has just become a business. It's the fun of playing the game for the sake of playing the game. It's just the whole business aspect of it. I feel very fortunate because as my kids were getting out of minor hockey, I saw this starting to filter in. So I'm just really glad I missed it. But right now, like everyone's got a skating school or stick handling school, a ball handling school. People are opening prep schools for every sport. It's crazy. Personal training is available for me. And I have people in my family who are personal trainers. Give me your $100 for an hour with your kid, and I'll do it. I do club volleyball right now. And a lot of the coaches in our club do private lessons. I have some of my players go to these private sessions, $60, $70 an hour. They're paying these coaches to do all this stuff. I've been offered opportunities to do private lessons. At this point, I haven't. I'm hoping I don't change. I'm hoping my value system doesn't change on this. But I just can't bring myself to do this on the backs of parents. I understand every parent wants to get their child better, but there's goals out there. Everyone's setting these goals, whether it's the NHL, whether it's scholarships, and I don't know. I hate to be a Debbie Downer on this, but while my kids were playing hockey, I've watched parents spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on skating, on stick handling, on this with that school. I have not spent that kind of money. I know I spent a little bit extra money on my kids in certain times, especially around after they got drafted. But as I'm watching, I know teammates who every summer, thousands of dollars. My kids are now 24 and 25 years old, which means they finish university on with life. That's where most of those kids are. So it's thousands of dollars to make you a better hockey player. And when the parents say to me, "Oh, you know what? They love their hockey, and it's gonna," no, you're spending thousands of dollars to get them to the OHL. Like that's what you're doing, and they didn't get there. So those guys are all, a lot of them are all very successful. They're wonderful young men. I mean, they're still friends with my son, so I see them. But all that money you're doing and it didn't pay off for you, and why? I mean, Gretzky said you got to do other sports. And as I mentioned, my sons, after I think the age of 11, didn't do any summer sports. All the guys, let's play 4-on-4. No, come to skating school. Leading into draft year was crazy. Come to this camp. All the scouts will be there doing this. It's going to get, you're going to get hired. Come pay this $400 and come to this weekend camp. All the OHL scouts are there and they're going to get looked at. You're going to get OHL coaches there and it's going to help your draft stock. And all the kids went there. My sons, neither of my sons went there. Both my sons were drafted. One of my sons played 4 years in the OHL. He didn't do all that stuff. So do you really need to be there? And I'm watching this going on and the obsession with getting these kids to the next level and how people are just jumping in and creating these schools. And hey, everyone needs to make a buck. All these people are qualified. A lot of these people I know, played in the OHL, played pro hockey. They're very qualified to do this. But people are just jumping on and just pumping the money because it is the thing to do. It's that chasing the dream. And it's sad to watch because that obsession is, we all know the percentages of guys who play pro, people who make it to pro hockey or pro any sport. The opportunity for scholarships are minimal. Depending on the sport dictates your opportunities for scholarships. And right now, the Americans, even look at hockey in particular, but Americans are pumping out their own athletes. So they're only going to use scholarship money on the most elite athletes from outside the United States. So the scholarship numbers are down there. And it's like, I'm watching all these things in the monetization of sports. And I think that is the most scary thing. And that's the most concerning thing for me as I see sports moving forward.
Along those lines, your daughter Sarah certainly has had experience at a very high level and success at an extremely high level, making history in 2022 at the Olympics for a host of reasons. And I wonder, how do you go about helping her deal with the notoriety and keeping her grounded moving forward?
I think she does a great job of that herself. I know one of the things me and her always talk about is never forgetting where he came from. Like right now, she's seeing a lot of success on and off the ice. But I think the reality for her is, hey, we scrapped and scraped to get here. And don't ever forget that when when the cameras are on, you got to remember that same girl who, carried her little bag into Lawfield Arena at 5 years old. So it's those kind of things. Me and my wife are a sounding board for her. So if she's got something going on, she doesn't hesitate to call and talk. And we still have talks about hockey. When over the course next little while, we will sit down and we'll talk about the World Championships and how everything went and how she played. And we'll go over all those things. And, we still have that good open line of communication that we could talk about things. But I really do believe that her humbleness comes from the fact that she had to work very hard for everything. She had to work very hard to make the national team, let alone set records, let alone play in World Championships and Olympics. And, how hard she worked, well, before the Olympic team, how hard she worked to get on the development team to put herself in the position to get on the Olympic team and on World Championship teams. And she's never lost on that. Like she always remembers that, how quickly we taken away and how important those girls do idolize her are. And, there are times we have to say we have to go a different route. We can't go here today and we can't go do this. But I also give her that same thing is, you sign every autograph, you take every picture, because to these girls, you're a rock star. And they'll never, even if these girls are fans of Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, your accessibility as compared to them is significantly different. So them being able to spend this time with you and you being that role model to them is important. One of the big things one of my big jokes with Sarah one time is after a game, she kind of got caught up and all the kids came up and she's come to see us. And before you know it, like half an hour later, she's finally done all the autographs and pictures. And she comes up and she's kind of like, okay, didn't think this was going to happen. I wanted to see you. And I said, this comes with it. And I said, you realize that how many times you go to a Leaf outing event game and one of the Leaf players comes off the ice, they sign a couple autographs, they take a picture with a couple of fans, and they leave. And they leave the other 30 people around them hanging. They just leave. And it's okay. But for you in women's hockey, who's such a role model, an important part of selling this game, you can never do that. And you can't get lost on the importance of what you do and how important you are when you have these conversations with these girls who are talking to you, because you are their hero. And most boys never get to meet their heroes. And if they do, they get 2 seconds, a selfie, and a blow off. And that's unfortunate. But it's unfortunate because those guys are so popular and they really don't have time to do all that. But they can get away with it. And, Sarah, Marie-Philippe Poulin, Hillary Knight, they can't. They have to sell their game. And that grassroots, I think, is very important to her and all her colleagues, and they remember that.
Roger, your most proud parenting moment?
Wow. I don't think there is a moment per se. And I'll tell you why. Because there have been a lot of moments. And I could kind of go and I could, say for each kid, like, hey, Elijah's great moment was when he was 10 years old, he got cut from the AAA team. Later in the season, he was a call-up for the team, and they called him up and they brought him into the playoffs. And in the deciding game of the series, he's on the ice, makes a steal, goes in, scores a goal that wins the series for the team that cut him. What a great moment. Took him out for ice cream after, but what a great moment. Isaac had a moment. They were playing the Niagara Ice Dogs. Niagara Ice Dogs had beaten them all season. They got a 4-0 lead on Niagara, and everything is great. Niagara storms back, has all the momentum. They go to overtime. Isaac gets behind the defense, scores the overtime winner. Great moment. The announcer, the Hamilton boy, does all this. Great moment. Sarah last week against Sweden. Great moment. But they're just moments in time that will eventually fade. And I look at moments as your value. Like, we were watching the OHL championship game, the deciding game 6. I was watching a few weeks ago just because I wanted to get some video of some stuff. I was doing a little project. So I wanted to get a little video. But I ended up watching the entire game. And what really was important was I'm looking, and at the end of the game, Isaac was on the ice. I was like, okay. Then I would decide to go back and watch the gold medal game of the Olympics. Sarah was on the ice when the clock ticked down. And for me, those moments are more important because they show value. You're important to what this team does. And those things, to me, is instead of taking a moment, I'm taking the experience and saying, the most important game of the year, you're on the ice at the most important time. And that shows that your team, your coach, values what you bring to the table. And that, to me, is more important. That's more important than any particular moment, is how important you are to your team.
Roger Nurse, teacher, coach, and hockey dad, we really appreciate your time and perspective today.
Thanks for having me.